Good evening. Welcome to Firebase. I'm your host, Gary French. Those of you that know me know that I love the military and I love the U.S. Army since I am an Army guy. But tonight we have a special guest. We have a retired colonel from the Marine Corps. And it's not corpse, as a former president would say, it's the Marine Corps. I saw this man on Fox News, or read an article about him on Fox News, and he's a 30-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and I want to say not his resume, but his military pedigree is impressive. He's been around for a while. He's been very insightful. And what really attracted me to him when I saw his website was that he's running for U.S. Congress. And on the website, you will see big, bold letters with a red background that says Colonel Swan, U.S. House of Representatives. And below that, you'll see three key descriptors about this man: Christian, Marine, warrior. My friends, I love that because he put what is most important to him first: Christian. And when I say that, it's not just a Christian as saying, oh yeah, I'm a U.S. citizen, therefore I'm a Christian. This guy loves the Lord, and he puts his faith first. And ultimately, in our land, in our nation today, we don't just need to elect the right guy into office. We need to elect the right believer into office. And by that, I mean, without reservation, a Christian. Because our nation, whether you believe it or not, is founded on Judeo-Christian values. And our founding fathers used the Bible to help frame the Bill of Rights and the United States Constitution. As that saying right there, that lends to another show that you need to read the Constitution. Well, friends, enough about me, enough about the U.S. Constitution, although we can never get too much of the Constitution. Let me introduce you to Colonel Mitchell Swan. Colonel, welcome to our show this evening.
Thank you, Gary. It's a tremendous honor to be here, truly.
Well, when I saw that article about you, I was really impressed. And as a matter of fact, I just read through this, and the first sentence on your website that it says, Colonel Swan is a retired 30-year veteran of the Marine Corps, a warrior both for Christ and the Corps. He dedicated his life to service, leadership, and solving complex problems facing our American military. Brother, if there's ever been a time that we need godly people to stand up for our nation, it's right now. Tell me a little bit about the journey that led you, first of all, to faith in Jesus, and then we'll segue to where that journey is taking you into politics.
I think a lot of us start off our lives as Christians, but we really look at that as a faith. It's like our family tradition, and it's certainly a great story and gives us comfort. But I would say I got in the bones belief back in 2000 when my daughter was born. My daughter was born in August of 2000, and she had a cord wrap. And so for the first 25 minutes on this earth, she did not have a heartbeat. And so she's very involved with cerebral palsy and lives in a wheelchair. But we were losing her in the NICU. And I'll tell you, I went down to the chapel and I did the most heartfelt, sincere prayer I'd ever done. I mean, alligator tears in the eyes. I tried to read some scripture, but I couldn't even focus. And I had a real physical event there. And that's when it went right into my bones. Now, the thing is, when you really get strong faith and conviction,
right?
That's a great responsibility. It's as much comfort as it is a burden because you can't deny him anymore. The stronger your faith gets, the more uncomfortable you are in this world.
Yeah.
Now, I came into the Marines under Ronald Reagan back in 1987. I got out under Trump. Seen a lot of changes in the world. And I find that I'm getting very uncomfortable when we live in a nation now that is actually normalizing, sodomy and sinful behavior. When you think back when the rainbow was first discussed after Noah, and it was a symbol of God's promise not to kill us with water again for our sin, that never flew in front of a church as a promise and a warning. But now that it totally embodies everything about sin, now it's flying in about, I'm going to guess, a third of our churches, and so that troubles me. And obviously when you see, and we'll talk about things later on, but when we start to get into some of these bills they're passing, the training required in the DOD, it seems like we're going to have to start, we're fighting a culture war daily against the very family values that many of us were raised on and want to raise our family on.
Yeah. Well, when you make mention of going in 1987 under Ronald Reagan, I was a captain at the time when you were, and so I'm a little bit older than you. Well, probably a lot bit older than you, but I remember those days with a great deal of pride, serving the military. But it was really serving our country. You've made a career, if I can use that terminology, of serving our country. And as a matter of fact, you wrote a book called Broken Arrow, Christ's Last Stand. What promoted you to write that book? I mean, it's just, there it is. Folks, I would hold that up again, Colonel, if you would. I want people to see that. And then we will, there on the screen underneath that, we'll put some contact information, how people can get that. And you know what? You hit it right square on the head about the decline of our faith in Western culture. What was there, either from travels around the world or the culture in the military, or just God urging you to write that?
Well, there's two things there. One's a quote from Napoleon. I'll give that to you shortly. The first event was that I had just checked in December of 2010 to CENTCOM down in Tampa. And on the 18th of December of that year, we had a young man emulate himself in Tunisia. And of course, that sparked the Arab Spring. A lot of revolts, that contagion leapt over Libya, went into Egypt. Now, Egypt was the bedrock for our campaign strategy in the Middle East because it had been stable for 30 years under Mubarak. But under the Arab Spring, it took about 16 weeks and he was completely out of power. Now, obviously, we wanted to retain him there. And General Mattis came in and he said, gentlemen, you must save Egypt. As Egypt goes, so goes the Arab world. And of course, we're all looking at him. And he said, let me explain. He said, there's 88 million Muslim Arabs living in Egypt, more than twice the number of any other Arab country, including Saudi Arabia, where the two holy mosques are. And he said, for that fact, the contentment, the ideology, the outlook of Egypt ripples out and affects the other Arab countries. And then it goes beyond that and affects the other Islamic countries. When Egypt's happy and stable, Islam is happy and stable. And, writing policy and so forth and trying to, research other countries, you end up researching your own when you see all these problems. And it dawned on me, we have twice the number of Christians of any other country. We average 17 and a half churches in every incorporated town. So when you look at this and you realize and you see the retreat of our Christian faith, whether it's in Western Europe, Canada, Australia, and others in our own domestic area, you start to ring the alarm bell because it has, as our faith goes, so goes the free world. And Amen. One of the quotes that haunted me, quite honestly, was one that's attributed to Napoleon in 1812 on the island of St. Helena, where he said, now he is not a Christian. He's the guy that coined the phrase, rule with an iron fist and a velvet glove. But he said, I know men, and Jesus Christ is no mere man. Among him and every other, there is no possible comparison on earth. Charlemagne, Alexander, Caesar, and I built empires, but upon what did we rest our genius? Upon force. Jesus Christ built an empire based on love, and at this hour, millions stand ready to die for him. Now, That haunts me for a few reasons. One, the guy's not a Christian, but it was a conundrum, right? If you're a dictator or if you're a brutal president or a king or a monarch or whatever, you cannot get Christians to submit to your ultimate authority because they've already given their heart to Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And we are willing to die for our virtues and our values and the things that we cherish. My question that haunts me is, do those millions still exist?
Well, that's a great question.
We live in a time now, and this is what I used to tell my Marines. We obviously feel the pressure of the world on us every single day. And I don't know if this is biblical, but I think that it's in alignment with our faith. Because even Jesus Christ himself stood on a mountain, and he knew that not everyone got him. Those with ears hear. And he's God. But when I tell my Marines, there's 7.8 billion people in the world. Understand, we're all different. No one of us are the same. We have different backgrounds, different parents, different, books we've read. Once you understand that everyone is different, then you have to tolerate the differences. I will never compel anyone by force, intimidation, or a baseball bat to vote the way I vote, pray the way I pray, or love the way I love. But the third element of all of this is acceptance. Now, acceptance is important, Gary, because what you and I accept or reject as moral absolutes, it defines our character. And that is sacred. I accept this as being always true. I reject that as always being wicked or evil.
That's right.
Now, that comes from our parents, our mentors, the jobs we've had, the books we've read, our own self-reflection. That's individual liberty. Nobody should ever make you surrender on those principles. That's what this country was grounded on. It wasn't grounded on collective liberty. It was individual liberty. Now, the wickedness comes in when people say, well, Mitch, do you understand there's Muslims in the world? Of course I do. Do you tolerate their faith? Absolutely. I hope they have an abundant life and it works out well for them. But don't you accept Islam as being morally equal with your Christian values and your Christian faith? Absolutely not. I wholly reject it. It's completely different. I would expect them to reject it too. So those are the things we have when we talk, when we talk about principles. And too often,
well, what you're talking about is you're talking about absolute truth. And we as Christians believe that when people say there's no such thing as absolute truth, I look at them and say, is that true? Because their statement is that way. Friends, we're talking with Colonel Swan, who's running for U.S. Congress. After this short break, we will continue our conversation. Stay tuned. Welcome back from that short break. Glad you've stayed with us. Talking this evening with Colonel Swan from Georgia. He's running for Congress. And those of our fans who see this in Georgia, we want you to make sure tune in, check this guy out, and find out this much about him. I know a lot of people are saying, it's just another politician. Let me tell you, this man loves the Lord, and that's the most important thing for him. As a matter of fact, he's already said it, is that winning people to Jesus is what his campaign is about. And I tell you what, whether that turns you on or flicks your bick or doesn't do anything for you, let me tell you, we need more men of faith, Christian faith, who will stand up and proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. Colonel Swan, before we went to our break, we were talking about your book, Broken Arrow, Christ's Last Stand. You made a statement about retreat of the Christian faith. I love that because what seems to be happening is that the church today, unfortunately, is allowing non-believers to define what it means to be a believer, and we're allowing them to tell us that we are not essential. Well, let me segue from that to what I found on your website, that you were talking about the real issues, and you've kept it simple. I like that. You're talking about hull integrity, about propulsion, and about steerage. Would you clarify to our audience what you mean by those three components or those three issues that you make mention?
Sure. So I tell people, if you elect me and I go to Washington, no freshman congressman is going to change the world. And this is a big government and so forth. But we can change the dialogue and then set our own priorities. And so my priorities are border security, the economy, and education and culture. I cheat and link those as two because one really drives the other. Now, I explain to people, if you look at our nation as a big ship, and you've just been hit by a missile or something, sailors will tell you the first thing you're concerned about is hull integrity. Are we sinking? Because if you are sinking, nothing else has your attention but that, because nothing else is more valuable. So our borders are the hull of this nation. And we truly are sinking. The spillage coming over, it's drugs, it's disease, it's crime, it's terrorists. We have got to tighten that up. Now, the second thing I tell people is once you've got your hull tight, the ship's engineer is going to tell you, hey, we got to go check the engine room, right? If you don't have propulsion, you're floundering and you go wherever the winds and the currents push you. So our engine as a nation is our economy. It drives everything. It pays for everything. There's no build back anything without a robust economy. And we're feeling that effect now. In 2019, in November, we had the strongest economy on the history of Earth. Think about that. That was only 27 months ago. It's not a matter that we had record unemployment. Another way to say that, we had record employment. Yes. Can we do that again? And our border was getting tighter and we're energy independent. Truly, we've just turned off under this administration 2 million barrels of domestic oil production per day. And people say, well, that's great, Mitch, because we're going to go green and, save the world. Well, we still need those 2 million barrels per day. All we're doing now is purchasing them overseas, shipping them over here, and then still burning them domestically. It's done nothing but drive inflation up. So
You make a great point there. I apologize for interrupting you, but your point is that we've got to make sure that there's the hull integrity. I love that statement because with the people flooding into the border, my first thought when you said that, if we got too many people in the boat will sink.
Yeah.
And with the open borders that we've got right now, it seems like it's causing the boat. We're about to capsize. In my life, I thought Jimmy Carter was the worst president, and then I thought Barack Obama was the worst president. You know what? There's no doubt in my mind. Joe Biden is the worst illegally elected president in the history of our land. And for me, what you've just said about our borders answers this question. I wrote this down. What are some of the biggest issues you see facing our nation, our culture, the military, and the church today? And you've already hit right on it. It's the open borders and for me, the transgender issues. Those are two that need to be resolved. What are your thoughts about that?
Let's take that into the final component of steerage, right, for a ship. So once you've got hull integrity, you got an engine, your rudder determines your future, like where you're going to be. So steerage is the mechanism that allows you to set your course. I'm at point A, I want to get to point B.
Right.
Where we go as a nation the next 10, 20, 30 years, this is a fact. It is determined by what competencies and skills we teach our children today in the classroom. So you want to be an agricultural, nation, teach ag. And if you want to be computer literate and technology, teach computer sciences. But right now, when I graduated high school in 1983, we were still #1 in the world for education and had been for 100 years. And today our kids are 25th in the world for math, reading, and science. 25th. Yeah, that's a thing. The average American adult reads below a 6th grade level. Now that's horrifying. Yeah. So when you look at what our schools are doing, what they're failing at, but what they're trying to indoctrinate our kids with, and this is the segue to what you're saying, we're trying to sexualize children. It's not that they're not learning how to read. They're not reading. They're having, transvestites come in and read to them during story time in some
drag
schools.
queens coming in, the little kids.
Yeah. So this is all a lot of wicked. And so someone is trying to get us off course. Someone has a destination in mind for us. It feels like communism to me, certainly the path of our culture. Our culture, our Christian faith is the mortar that keeps the bricks together.
Amen.
You take that mortar out, we become a nation of individuals. It totally collapses. And I'll tell you what, then they can have socialism. Because those millions we spoke about, they won't be around anymore that Napoleon feared.
There's the late, great motivational speaker, Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N. I don't know if you ever seen him or heard him. Get a chance to YouTube. Rohn would say in his motivational speeches, he says, consider your life as a ship. You're on a ship and you've got the currents of the water. You've got the winds that blow. And he says, the currents will come regardless. The wind will blow regardless. What you need to do in the current of life and the winds that prevail, you need to set your sail. And because if you set your sail, you can harness the winds that blow your way. And so what you're talking about is setting your sail to capture the winds. And let's just pick, faith in Christ or capitalism or remembering our history. Or I like to think of this, the coach, when I played football, I said, we got to get back to basics. Of course, he was chewing Red Man and he'd spit when he say that. So for our nation, we need to return to our basics in order to return to some high values there. We've got about 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. So I would say that we need to get back to those immortal principles, right? So I'm not even dragging people to church because I know that I have a God that is a powerful God and he can give the gift of faith anytime he wants. But those immortal principles of do not lie, steal, cheat, covet, murder, they built the greatest societies in the history of Earth. And as we discussed, anywhere they've expanded, life got better for people. And where they've retreated, life got worse. But those are the basics. Now, what a wonderful set of rules for someone when we face all these immigrants coming in here from different parts of the world that share none of our ideals. Hey, just follow those 10 rules and you'll be fine. No one's going to be knocking on your door and you're going to end up being a very good citizen. But absent hanging those on the walls, how do you teach them how to assimilate into our nation? So that's one of the things that I think about.
Why is that so important that, you talk about assimilate into the culture? Can't they just bring their culture here and keep on doing what they did and the land they left?
No, that dilutes the culture. We all know that very plainly. So we know we can't even define any longer what it means to be an American, right? And that's what concerns me. One of the things I remember is that Benjamin Franklin had a great quote. He said, "To put forth benefit for the common good is divine." We don't
Yes.
talk about the common good anymore, right? We're looking at that little segment, and we're going to actually run 2 million service members through inclusion and diversity training twice a year, 2 million people, so that a handful of them feel good about their work environment. And it's breaking the morale of everyone else because, again, it's waging a culture war against some very personal things that they were raised upon, and this goes against them.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of 2 or 3 weeks ago, Texas had a primary election, and speaking with John Graves, and John said only about 10% of the people in Texas voted in that primary. In 2012, 25 million registered to vote Christians didn't even bother to vote. And if you can, in about 15 or 20 seconds, why is it important for them to vote?
Well, that's the bedrock of our nation, right? If you want to be the leaders of this country, that's the one chance you get to shape our trajectory, our course. And if you sit that out, like many do, then you have no right to complain about where we go.
So awesome words. Friends, we're talking with Colonel Swan, candidate for U.S. House of Representatives in Georgia. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Glad you've stayed with us this evening. What a great evening. This has been refreshing time spending with Colonel Mitchell Swan, candidate for Congress there in Georgia. Those folks that see this, I want you to share this on social media. I want you to forward to other people, and I want you to at least prayerfully consider this man. I think he will do more than enough to earn your vote. Colonel, one of the things that came to my mind when I was writing some notes in prep for this show, and I shared with you when we were not on the air, that I always over prepare. That's the way God has made me. I don't know if that's military training or just getting ready for everything, but you've hit on some of the things that you see, some of the biggest issues in our nation. And I want to say in the last 4 minutes to give to you, how will you be different when you get elected into office?
Let's agree what the problem is right now then. The problem with our nation was highlighted last week with Leah Thomas being recognized an NCAA female champion swimmer. Okay. And then I had Rachel Levine also be recognized as Woman of the Year by USA Today. And both of them are trans women. Okay. That is not, the people that applaud that are literally celebrating the feminization of men. That's what that is, because they're not women. They are not cheering true accomplishments of real women. So I would say right now, where I'm going to help with this, you have to agree with me on this point, that strong men build strong nations and weak men break strong nations. And we have a deficit right now in masculinity and Christianity.
Well, that's true.
In August of 2012, when Dan Cathy just said that he supported biblical marriage and wouldn't budge off of that point. Everyone attacked him, but that motivated Christians to stand arm in arm with him. And then they had Chick-fil-A Day, and 585,000 people didn't know what else they could do. So they went and bought a chicken sandwich to show that they still supported biblical marriage.
Amen.
When you speak truth in a masculine way, it resonates with people. And when people say, well, Mitch, what's your pathway to Washington? You're a career veteran, you don't have much money in the bank, and I don't. That's a big thing. My thing is, if everyone that bought a chicken sandwich in my district or across the country sent $10 to a candidate that had their Christian principles and just did that, $10 to the guy you like, you could affect meaningful change in this country. We need to get men like that back into Washington. Otherwise, it's game over.
Amen. I think that's absolutely right. And for some people, for them, they think that it's game over already. And there's a lot of people that are so discouraged, they're not even going to bother to vote. And the values that you're espousing and the issues that you're talking about and confronting are issues that we cannot ignore any longer. We've got men that are confused thinking that they're women. And then we've got Christians who think that they should not be involved in politics. It comes down to the same issue there. What do you think we can do to encourage those people to say, you've got to get out and vote? And you've got about a minute now, Colonel.
Well, I just always tell people that courage is contagious. But what weak faith a person must have to say, you know what, I'm going to leave the basket on my lamp, because if I shine too much, the dark's going to notice me. Our job's to displace that. And so, as you and I were discussing, I have my own little saying that the righteous person builds their house, but the sinner by their own hand tears theirs down. Sinners are going to sin. We can't fix that. Our job is to be the builders. That's where we come in. And so I'm encouraging everyone, fire someone else up. Yes, there are people on the sidelines that are just timid right now to lead the charge, but they'll certainly follow. Heraclitus said this, and he was a Greek philosopher 500 years before Christ. He said, for every 100 going into combat, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets, but 9 are fighters, and we're thankful for them, for they make the battle. But one is a warrior, and he brings the others home.
We're running out of time. I'm sorry. Listen, Zig Ziglar said there's 3 things I'm sure of. 1, there is a God. 2, you ain't God. Number 3, I ain't either. So it becomes important to have the right priorities. Friends, I pray that you will go to Colonel Swan's website that you see on the screen and check him out. Thanks for being with us this evening. We appreciate your time. God bless.